Honourable Member for Nipissing-Timiskaming.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am pleased to rise in this House to discuss an important piece of legislation that will protect the property rights of millions of Canadians. I am, of course, referring to Bill C-42, the Commonsense Firearms Licensing Act. This legislation will, among other things, remove needless paperwork around the authorization to transport restricted and prohibited firearms, end the arbitrary powers of chief firearms officers, and give elected government the final say over firearms classification decisions. I would like to take this opportunity today to clarify some falsehoods, mistruths, and inaccuracies that have been put forth by the Liberals and the NDP over the course of the debate on this legislation. First, the Liberals put out an advertisement to try and bolster their subpar fundraising numbers that claimed that under this bill, the sky would fall and there would be handguns in the trunks of all cars in shopping malls and grocery stores from coast to coast. Mr. Speaker, we all knew that this was nonsense. There are clear locations that restricted firearms can be taken so that are laid out in the regulations under the Firearms Act. And anyone who has read the bill knows that those do not change. However, the member for Yukon did his due diligence. During a committee study of this important bill, he asked the Assistant Deputy Minister for Community Safety and Countering Crime, a nonpartisan public service, if the Liberal advertisement was accurate. And Mr. Speaker, here was her response: no. Mr. Speaker, we all know that the penchant for bureaucrats speaking in circles. That is pretty clear and simply condemnation of the leader of the Liberal Party and his inaccurate material. Mr. Speaker, we also heard from the Liberal member from Trinity Spadina making a moral equivalency between hunters and terrorists. This type of ridiculous hyperbole would be offensive. If you did not consider the source, this was the very same member who had previously called for a ban on the sale of bullets as a solution to gun crime. Let's look at the facts, Mr. Speaker. Based on the evidence from Statistics Canada, a Canadian is 26 times more likely to die from a slip and fall than a firearms accident or homicide. They are 24 times as likely to die from a car accident, 3 times as likely to die while swimming, and equally as likely to die in a bicycle accident as a death involving firearms. Clearly, the Liberals do not have the ability to set appropriate priorities when balancing private property rights against public safety. Perhaps a ban on bicycles will be the next big Liberal policy. And Mr. Speaker, when we talk about factual inaccuracies, the NDP do not fare much better. First of all, the NDP leader has said that he would bring back the wasteful and ineffective long gun registry. He even said that he wanted to track every firearm in Canada. This is despite the fact that the NDP member for Timmins, James Bay, was very clear when he said that the NDP would never bring forward measures to require registration of shotguns and rifles. Rural Canadians want to know who is it that really speaks for the NDP, because they seem to have different messages in downtown Ottawa and Montreal than they do in rural Canada. But it's not only confusion in their own ranks that the NDP suffers from, they seem to also have a disconnect with reality. The NDP member from Esquimalt, Wanda Fuka, has said a number of times that the Minister of Public Safety personally authorized the reclassification of the Swiss Arms and CZ-858 rifles. This is something that is clearly inaccurate. However, I wanted to take the time to do the due diligence. I looked up the database of all orders in council and I could not find a single one pertaining to this one. Clearly, what occurred here is a unilateral reclassification by the Canadians Firearms Program with no notice to elected officials. It is important that we change this immediately, as it flies in the face of democratic principles. These unfortunate comments were from the same member who berated two expert witnesses at the Public Safety Committee before ending his tirade with, "I'm not sure there's any point in continuing to ask you any questions then if you're right on everything you've already said." Mr. Speaker, it is clear that there is an anti-gun bias across the aisle. These people simply won't rest until they have prohibited all firearms in Canada. However, it seems that the NDP and Liberals continue to believe that hunting and sport shooting are the remit of backwards rural folks. The fact of the matter is that they are wrong. A low estimate puts about 4 million Canadians, an estimate of about 4 million Canadians involved in these activities each year. I would quote Greg Farrant from the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters, who said before the Public Safety Committee, "Firearms owners in Canada are judges, lawyers, farmers, electricians, mechanics, plumbers, accountants, and even federal politicians who live and represent urban ridings. They are not criminals. They are not gang members, but rather they are lawful firearms owners who obey the law." However, it is clear that the message has not yet sunk in across the aisle. Some members of the Liberals and NDP have taken the debate on firearms issues as an opportunity to engage in a drive-by smear of outdoor enthusiasts by saying that those who want to be able to obey clear rules are part of an American-style gun lobby, or are advocating for a return to, as one NDP member from Quebec said, the Wild West gun laws. This is patently ridiculous and is offensive to the millions of law-abiding Canadian gun owners. However, Mr. Speaker, they will hear from their constituents in a few short months from now on whether or not there is support for safe and sensible measures such as the bill before us today. I look forward to telling my constituents why I support cutting red tape on law-abiding Canadians. I hope that those who chose to oppose this much-needed bill will be able to face the questions that are undoubtedly coming their way. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.